Welcome into another edition of the Sharps Report here on BettingPros.com. My name is Matt Perrault. I'm the host of the Daily Juice podcast. Every week, we talk to different market makers, pro gamblers, media members, and people in the sports gambling space about what's happening around sports gambling. And this week, we're very happy to be joined by Thomas Casale. He's the media director for ProFootballDoc.com, joining us here on the Sharps Report. Thomas, Matt Perrault, thanks for joining us. Thanks for the time.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Well, you and I have gone back and forth for a ton of time here on Twitter and talking DMing and everything else about the gambling world. But this is my first time actually getting a chance to interview you. So tell the audience a bit about your history, how long you've been involved in sports betting and what you're doing in the sports betting space.
Sure. So I've been betting for a long time, over 30 years. My father was the worst kind of bettor, a degenerate, leave us sitting in the car for 3 hours while he went inside to OTB, so I kind of grew up around that. And I got into it the way you shouldn't probably, right? Like betting way too much, money that I didn't have. So early on, I learned a lot of lessons about sports betting. Let's put it that way. There's still a bookie or two out there probably looking for me. So if they see this show, they might be coming after me. But, those are lessons that I learned a long time ago that I use now. And, I try to pass them off to, anybody who follows me on Twitter, because listen, this is about money. You're betting your hard-earned money and you want to do it wisely and you want to do it with good information.
In terms of how the space has changed from when you first started and how you've been in it for 30 years, like how do you currently feel about the legalization and where we are here in the sports gambling evolution, if you want to call it that, in terms of legalization?
Well, I think it's exciting, obviously, long overdue. Think about how hard people work in life, and they just want to bet a $10 parlay, and they gotta go offshore and all that. I mean, I'm in New York, so we still have to drive to a sports book to place a bet, which is absolutely ridiculous. But I think it's exciting. In terms of like the media industry, I think right now everybody's in it, right? Everybody's in the sports betting. It's going to bring you money. It's the short term. It's going to be interesting to see where this goes long term though, because I was in fantasy football in the late 90s when it first started. And it's a little bit similar where everybody's rushing to get that gold, but we'll see who's still standing in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think a lot of people are trying to figure out the roadmap from the daily fantasy world, right? And unfortunately, it feels like we're headed towards a place where the government is going to get involved here like they did with daily fantasy. Is it frustrating that we didn't learn the lesson, that it feels like the sports gambling world, even some of those companies that were involved in the DFS, involvement with the government, that the same mistakes are being made with overselling, if you will, or too many advertisements or too much targeting of people under the age of 21?
Yeah, it is. The one thing about sports betting that I think is a little bit different is that the government sees that they can make money from it. Where DFS failed and still fails, I think, and it's probably never going to get over this problem, is the casual fan tried it and didn't like it because they weren't economics majors with spreadsheets. And listen, I know as much about football as, almost anybody. And I was winning $3 in these DFS things, right? And so it's not fun to the casual person, where I think sports betting is, even if you're only putting a couple. I always tell people, my friends bet 1/500th of what I bet, but their investment in that bet is the same as mine. It doesn't matter how much you're putting on it, right? It just matters that you're invested financially, and it makes the games more interesting.
Absolutely. I tell people all the time, I never unit shame at all. You got $5 or 5,000. I don't care. The second you put your money down on it, you're taking a position and you're putting your money down on it. And it's just whatever you feel comfortable risking. It's all on you. But I don't look down upon anybody for what they're betting or how much they're betting. It's money's money, man. You're putting $5 down. It's still your $5 you're putting down to go ahead and predict what a human being is going to do, which makes it really difficult. And that kind of takes me where I want to go into this here for this episode and talk about future betting, because I've really enjoyed watching you and some of the things you have done in the futures market. And I'm just curious, like, have you always been attracted to betting futures markets, or did that evolve as you became a more educated gambler?
That evolved. It's like anything else, Matt. It's a skill. Every sport is a skill. So years ago, I realized my lifetime winning percentage in NBA was about 18%. So I said, you know what? Maybe I'll stop betting NBA because I'm not any good at it, right? So those are things I learned along the line, were sports that I was good at. But then I I just have a special knack, I guess, a talent for futures where I'm able to break down teams and see the depths of the teams. And, listen, when you bet a future, you need a little bit of luck, right? I had a streak going 6 of 8 NCAA tournament winners. And if you go back and look at those teams had games where they needed like a last second shot or, they needed a foul call. So there's a little luck involved, but you're trying to find value, and you're trying to put yourself in a position to be there at the end of the season and have a chance.
Look, I bet the over on the Cardinals win total, and I thought I was dead. And then they won 17 games in a row, and I got over on that. So absolutely, sometimes you just need some luck and teams to turn things around. But as a whole, because of the volatility day to day that we see in sports and trying to bet the market or beat the market on that one day, do you feel like, not that the odds level out a little bit, but it's a little bit less volatile when you're betting a futures market, when you're looking at the totality, either for a win total or for a team to win a division or to win a championship, that it's over the course of an entire season you're betting versus one day for humans to go out there and do something you predict?
I do. And, I'll give you 2 examples. A couple of years ago, I bet the Ravens at 40-1 to win the Super Bowl. My thinking was, if Lamar Jackson improves a little bit, this team's loaded. Right? Everywhere else, they're loaded. Now, they didn't end up winning. We know they went in the playoffs, but they had that good run. And I got to tell you, Matt, I'm kicking myself. I'm absolutely kicking myself because this year I looked at the board and I ended up going with the Bills because I thought they were the most talented team. But the best value, and I'm not just saying it, the Cardinals were sitting there 45-1. I looked at that team up and down, and you know what threw me? And this is a mistake, so I'm still making mistakes 30 years later. Cliff Kingsbury. I just don't like him. And so I was talking myself out. But when you break down like the teams, I mean, San Francisco was what, like 15-1? And the Cardinals were 45-1. So I look at that a lot too. Like the year I took the Ravens, you'll remember everybody was on the Browns that year, right? They were down to like 12-1. Yeah. And I said, if you put the Browns and Ravens next to each other, can you tell me who's better? So you're just kind of looking for value in the number, and teams, if they get to the playoffs, can make a run.
Do you ever take positions with the either A, idea that you're going to sell the ticket on the secondary market as it increases in value, or B, to have a hedge opportunity on the other side if potentially the team either isn't doing as well as you want, or they get to a game like a championship game and you have a chance to bet the other side? So you bet an AFC championship, they're in it, and you have a chance to bet the other side. Do you ever look at hedge opportunities as well?
I do. The way my makeup is, I kind of like to go for it, but it also depends on your odds. So the year the Ravens played the Titans, if they had played the Chiefs, I would have hedged because I think that was a terrible match. We saw how they struggled against the Chiefs up until this year with the blitzing against Mahomes. So I didn't like that matchup. So I needed one win there to be able to hedge, and I didn't get it. And it really all depends on if I have the better team and by how much. Like if I had Baylor this year, right, I probably would have hedged with Gonzaga because that was an even game. You know what I'm saying? Yep. So I think it depends on where you're at. But if you have bigger odds, like, we'll talk about college basketball in a second, but I bet Auburn at 70-1. 70-1. I mean, listen, if they're in the Final Four, I'm going to hedge.
Makes sense, right? I mean, just because of where you are, just the likelihood of them being able to get there, even though you handicapped it right, you have to take a look at do they hit their ceiling? Mm-hmm. Is there one sport that you like more than others when it comes to betting on futures?
Yeah, the NFL I like. I like betting NFL futures more than I like betting NFL games. The NFL, you bet it every week, man. Those lines, they're tough. It's hard to find value in an NFL line. So I think, we mentioned the Ravens a couple of years ago. Listen, there's 2 teams that you and we might be the only 2 people who bet over on Raiders and Bengals. Might be the only 2 people on earth. And,
my 2 favorite bets.
One of the things I saw with both those teams that I think the media missed, look at their defensive lines. Look at the Bengals and Raiders defensive line. Nobody was talking about that, right? And I thought, boy, if this plays out, these 2 teams will have better defenses than what people think. So, it's all a process. And then college basketball is my main sport. That's where I make my most money. And that's kind of tough to bet futures right now. I mean, listen, it's March Madness. Anything can happen. But if you can find a team that you don't think is going to be close to that number in March, then I would jump on the number.
Yeah, I think the reason why I looked at the Raiders for a couple of reasons. And one, I'm in Vegas, so I'm kind of around it, so I can see it a little bit more. But I don't hate Derek Carr the way everyone else hates Derek Carr. And I went back and looked at just the numbers for him when he had A, an offensive line that would protect him, and B, if he had weapons. And going back to the year where he almost won the MVP before he broke his ankle, he had weapons. And this year, he's got weapons. And Waller is continuing to develop. And I think you have Ruggs going from year 1 to year 2, which he's taken a big step forward. And you've got the running game now. I didn't hate the Drake addition. Like, everyone was like, why are you bringing in Kenyon Drake? I was like, I don't know, because he's a good third down back. And he gives you a break from Jacobs if he gets hurt. And that's what happened. Jacobs has been banged up, and he's had, Drake's come in and played pretty well. And Max Crosby's been a really nice addition. And Gus Bradley, I think, was the biggest undersold hiring because they needed an identity from a defensive coordinator to come in and be tough. And frankly, John Gruden getting fired, I feel better about our ticket now that Gruden's been fired. And they've got 5 wins. I mean, we may cash it in 2 weeks. I mean, they may get to 7 here in 2 weeks, given the way they're playing. And from a Bengals perspective, I just think Jamar Chase, everybody forgot about Jamar Chase as to how good that guy really is.
Better numbers than Devontae Smith. And, we're hearing about his 3 drops in the preseason.
Right. Everyone's like, you can't see the ball because it's different. And I'm like, wait a minute. This dude was the best player in all of college football in 2019. He was the best player. You want to say why? I mean, to me, I was looking at it, going like Burrow may have been the story, but the reason why LSU won was because Jamar Chase broke every record in the SEC for receiving that you could break. And everyone kind of forgot about that in 2020. And I was like, if he goes to the Bengals, I love the Bengals because their defensive line, like I agree with you, was going to be better than people thought. And it has been better. But the connection between Burrow and Chase is just insane right now. And they're torching every defense that they go ahead and face. And Burrow's injury question, that did scare me a little bit. It helped us, I think, get a better number that he wasn't going to be, everyone's like, yeah, look really shaky in practice coming off that knee injury. I was like, yeah, but it's August. Like, we're going to play games in September. Like, what are we worried about? So I like that a lot. In terms of betting overs or unders, do you prefer which one? Did you care? Are you okay with pulling for unders and betting unders when it comes to futures for wins?
Yeah, I probably bet more overs than unders. I will bet unders in futures. Listen, I've never won an under in a football game ever. I tell people all the time. Years ago, when the Rams had that good offense, they played Carolina, and this was before we had all this information. We heard it was going to be a monsoon and all this stuff. I bet under, and the score was 34-31 at the half. So those are my under bets in terms of total. So that, again, as I learned, I said, I'm not going to bet totals. I'm not really that good at them. But yeah, no, there's some opportunities a lot of times. One of the ones I didn't put a ton of money on it. I just threw a little bit on it, but I took under on Indiana in football this year. I thought everything went right for them last year. They had a quarterback coming back from an injury, and I thought the win total was set a little bit high. So I will take unders. It's just, overs are more fun to root for.
Yeah, good call by you. I bet the under on Iowa, and that's obviously going to be dead wrong in what they did. And
I was looking on Iowa, though. I thought they were. I didn't see it. I didn't see. But then again, it's hard to predict 4 interceptions, 3 return for touchdowns, block punts every game. It's amazing what they do.
I mean, the turnover luck is insanity, and people argue, well, hold on, interceptions is not luck. Fumble luck is turnover luck, not interceptions. I'm like, okay, but they're back 7. I mean, the first 5 games of the season, it was ridiculous, including the Indiana game where Penix just was awful. And I thought Michael Penix was going to come back and play really well. And off those 2 ACL injuries, he's been horrible. And Indiana's had a really rough year this year because their defense is okay, but not good enough to overcome all the turnovers that their offense has been putting them in. So yeah, I'm going to be wrong on Iowa, and Iowa's on my no bet list. I'm 0-3 betting Iowa games this year, so I am done on Iowa. I'm going to lose their over. I'm going to go 0-4 Iowa fans love to remind me how much money I'm losing on their team. So like,
you're crazy. Talk about one of the best fan bases. You say something bad about Iowa, forget about it. They'll follow you for years.
Go work there for 2 years and be on radio in Des Moines and say all sorts of bad things about Iowa. They'll bring it up 10 years, literally 10 years since I left in 2011. And I still hear about things I said on the radio in Iowa about the Hawkeyes. So they have long memories in that state, as well as being very passionate and angry about what they're doing. In terms of where you are in the secondary ticket market, do you sell tickets on futures? Do you look at a prop swap website like that? Or do you ever go there and look to move off of a position that you take?
I haven't yet. It's not something I'm completely against, but I haven't really. Again, I like to roll the dice and play it out as far as I can. And the other thing too is you have to remember where I am in New York, so I can't bet on DraftKings, and we call them a local, right? I still got a guy who has his own website and his own, right, and I can get it on the phone, but I don't actually have DraftKings and FanDuel and BetMGM, which is just amazing. But yeah, so that's the other reason why I don't really sell tickets, is because I haven't had the opportunity yet.
Yeah, and I really hope New York gets this right at some point for downstate, as you guys call it. You have upstate sports gambling, brick and mortar, but not digital, not mobile yet. And hopefully downstate comes around, because the numbers. I'm very curious. You live in the area. Everyone was touting that New Jersey had $1 billion handle in the month of September. How much of that, when New York, if it does go downstate legal, how big of a chunk do you think that's going to take out of New Jersey?
I think it'll be a little bit of a chunk for sure. I live in more near Albany, New York. But I do know people in the city who drive across the bridge, go to that convenience store that's famously now known as Little Las Vegas, that people just pull in and go on their phone and bet. So I do think there's a fraction of people doing that. Listen, New Jersey's going to be fine, but New York is that's the big one. That's the big apple, right? That's why it's taking. But listen, Matt, politics, it took us 8 years to get MMA. We were the last state that could legalize it, who did. And I used to go to those hearings in Albany when I worked for Bellator at the time. It's shocking. Listening to these politicians talk, sometimes you have to wonder where we are in this world.
It's a great point. And there was personal conflicts and disliking Dana White and everything else that caused New York to be the last one to not legalize when it comes to mixed martial arts. By the way, what exit is Little Las Vegas? Do you know in New Jersey? That seems like an awesome business opportunity for somebody to go ahead and actually build something called Little Las Vegas for a convenience store right over.
I don't know. I just know people are driving over the bridge, whatever that means.
That's awesome. A Little Las Vegas. I think that's such a cool nickname. Someone definitely should open up a convenience store to go ahead and do that. And yeah, it's a gas station. We've seen people do gas station videos from it. I'm sitting here with my phone. Here's my gas station, whatever. And it makes total sense why they're doing it, because they have to cross over into Jersey to go ahead and do it. So, all right, let's talk some college basketball here heading into the year. Let's start with Gonzaga and where they are. They're going to be playing here in Vegas in a couple of weeks. I'm really trying. I'm hoping to be able to go over there and watch them. Is it them and everybody else, or are you thinking the field might be a little bit closer than people are projecting?
They're the best team. Listen, Gonzaga plays everybody early in the season. They can't do anything about their conference, but I think it hurts them a little bit when they get into the NCAA sometimes. You look at these teams that play these tough games night in and night out. And again, Gonzaga can't do anything about this. They're just so much better than everybody else in their conference. So they're going to be the favorite because they have the most talent. They have a great recruiting class. But I do think there's teams there that can, one of my biggest college basketball futures ever is this year. I don't know what Kansas is doing at 18-1. I have no idea why they're 18-1. No clue. They're loaded again, and that number isn't going to be close to 18-1 come March. So I do think there's teams that can challenge Gonzaga, but you can't go wrong betting Gonzaga if you want to take the short number, because the chances that they get tripped up before the Final Four aren't good. They just have too much talent all over the place. A lesser team's going to have trouble upsetting them in the NCAA tournament. But I do think it's going to be I don't think they're going to run through teams. There are some good teams out there this year. I'll tell you one thing. The SEC is absolutely loaded. It's going to be one of the only times where the SEC basketball is better than SEC football. There's teams all over that can compete there. Kentucky, Alabama, Arkansas, Auburn, Mississippi State is good. So again, playing those games every night, I think, does give you a little bit of edge in the NCAA tournament because you're going to come into a close game. Now, give Gonzaga credit. They hit that long shot last year. So, but, we saw them in that game against UCLA, and they did get past it. But listen, Baylor was just the best team in college basketball last year. There's no doubt about that.
I mean, where are you on UCLA? Because I can't figure this out. Like, I know they're returning a lot, but given that they were in the play-in game last year and they were, one game away from being one and done, a couple of possessions away from being one and done, Michigan State could have beaten them in that play-in game. And now all of a sudden I got to buy them as a 15-1, 16-1 national championship contender. I don't get this with UCLA. How do you feel about UCLA?
They're a little overvalued. That's a team, if I liked, I'd probably wait. Because I think they'll have a couple conference losses. The year North Carolina won it the last time they won it, I love North Carolina, and they had 3 losses in a row that year, and their number went from 8-1 to 20-1, and that's when I jumped on them. So that's the thing about betting college basketball futures. You don't have to bet them right now. You can wait. Right. The Pac-12, they're going to have a couple losses here, and I think you're going to get a better number than what you have right now for UCLA because they're basing this on last year's tournament run.
Right. Michigan and Purdue, 2 top teams in the Big Ten. Anybody else that you're liking? Any thoughts on Ohio State or Illinois?
The Big Ten's interesting this year, and I know John Rothstein has said this a couple times, and I agree with him. The Big Ten isn't as good this year as it was last year. You have a couple of those big teams like Michigan and Illinois is good. Ohio State's good. Purdue's really good. Then I think there's room for teams to move up, like a Northwestern, like a Nebraska. Nebraska's got a lot coming. Northwestern returns everybody. They lost a lot of close games. People look at the 13-game losing streak, but they could have won 7 or 8 of those games. So I think, Iowa's going to take a little bit of a step back this year. I think the Big Ten is going to be interesting. If you're looking for value, I think that's the conference more so than an SEC where there's just so many good teams. I don't see a team from the bottom coming up and challenging those teams.
Yeah, I think there's definitely the race to win the Big Ten is going to be really fascinating, and there's a lot of returning talent across. I mean, I don't know if I'm there with Purdue like everybody else. I mean, there's a lot of
they're way overvalued. They're good, but they're overvalued.
I'm just not there. I like Matt Painter a lot, but I'm just not there just yet. And look, the COVID extra year is Colin Gillespie. I mean, how long is this dude going to be in college? But Nova, I mean, they're back in it, right? I mean, Nova's got to be a team to be reckoned with again, right?
Yeah, no, they're good. Again, there's a team that could challenge Gonzaga. Remember, they gave Baylor their toughest test probably in that tournament with their defense because Villanova's going to play defense. They're going to be well coached. I mean, they're really good. I thought people were too high on UConn last year. I think UConn is really good too. I think people might have been a year early on them, but their front line is really, really tough. So I like both those teams in the biggest. I think your team has a good Creighton has a good recruiting class. They're very well coached, but obviously they're probably going to take a little bit of a step back this year, losing so much talent.
Yeah, I think that this is one of those like they'll win a game and lose a game they're not supposed to. That they'll be a bubble team.
It's a transition year for them.
Yeah, in the conversation, maybe they make a run in the Big East tournament and they get themselves into a bid perspective. But I think really next year is the year that they think they're going to be really back to contending for the Big East championship. Let me ask you about Texas, because this is the team that I have not bet yet, but I've been eyeballing here a little bit. I think Chris Beard having the ability to take in all the transfers and work in the transfer market, he's got so many transfers coming into this Texas team. If they can put it together, how dangerous is Texas?
Very dangerous. So here's the thing. I took Kansas, right, because they're 18-1, and I think that number is going to, shorten quite a bit. Texas, like you said, similar to Auburn, similar to Arkansas, they're bringing in so many new faces, and they're trying to mesh them. I think you're going to be able to get a better number on Texas because I think that first month and a half, Chris Beard's got to work with that lineup. We see it with Kentucky all the time. I remember Calipari after that loss to Duke with Zion was there when they got blown out. He said, it is what it is. He said, I use these early games almost like extra practices. He said, I don't even know who my team is half the time because I got so many new faces, right? So he's trying to find the rotation. He's trying to figure out the best way to use this. I think Chris Beard's going to have the same issue at Texas. By the end of the season, they're going to be unbelievable. So I would wait and grab a better number with Texas.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I love a coach who has the experience of taking all of these either guys from the JUCO ranks or transfer ranks and kind of getting them up to speed and buying into their system and kind of getting everybody together, on top of the fact that Texas recruits really well. And, this cupboard wasn't left totally bare for Chris Beard to come in and take over. I'm very curious about Texas. You mentioned Kansas already in Texas. Anybody else in the Big 12 that you think, how are you on Baylor?
Oh, Baylor's going to be good again. They lose a couple of key pieces. Obviously, they're, I had them 2 years ago at 40-1, and the tournament didn't happen. I thought they've been the best team in basketball 2 years straight. And last year they had a real chip on their shoulder after the tournament being canceled. A lot of those guys came back. They didn't have to come back. So I don't think they're going to be as good as they were last year, but they're definitely going to be contenders in the Big 12. The Big 12 to me is a little top heavy. I see those top couple teams, Baylor, Texas, and Kansas, and I see quite a big drop off to everybody else.
I know you got to run here in a couple of seconds, just a couple more minutes until you got to go. I think you have an event you got to go to, but where are you? You mentioned Auburn. Okay. So why are you taking Auburn 60-1? Why Auburn?
I just think they're, last year, nothing went right for Auburn. They had a bunch of problems. This year, all new players pretty much. You got Walker Kessler coming in. You got Jabari Smith, the super freshman. Their front line is going to be unbelievable. Their guard play is going to be there. Once Bruce Pearl gets his team going, they're going to be tough. I don't see them being anywhere near 70-1. I think they're going to be comfortably in the NCAA tournament. And I'll give you one more team to keep an eye on. Washington State in the Pac-12. They've been building something there the last couple of years, and they had the 24th ranked defense on KenPom last year. They return a lot of players. The Pac-12 is one of those sneaky conferences. Again, you got a couple of those teams up top with Oregon, UCLA. Then there's a lot of question marks. To me, I think Washington State can be a top 4 team in the Pac-12, and I expect them to make their first NCAA tournament since 2008.
Interesting. One more thing before I let you go. Everybody loves the non-Power 5, right? We have the Gonzaga. The Zags are the Zags. They're in their own world. But what do you make of Houston this coming year, and can they repeat anywhere close to the run they had last year?
Yeah, Houston's going to be really tough again. They have great coaching. They have great athletes. I don't think they're going to be as good as last season. I also think that, listen, no offense to Houston, they're a very good team. Sometimes the NCAA tournament shakes out right for you to make a run. And I thought listen, Syracuse went as far as they could. The teams like that, I thought Houston got a nice draw. And that's part of it. We talk about futures. You got to get a good draw in the NCAA tournament too in order to cash those futures. So I wouldn't expect Houston to be a Final Four team. I would just expect them to be a very good regular season team who could potentially make the Sweet 16.
Interesting stuff. Thomas, thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate your time. Best of luck on college basketball coming up. We'll talk to you down the line, all right?
Great. Thanks a lot.